The Backrooms. In real life, the backrooms are where stores keep merchandise before they go on the floor. In the lore of the internet, the backrooms is a space between reality, the out-of-bounds realm of our simulation, a place no one was ever meant to see, and a place from which you never truly return. Kane Parsons, also known as Kane Pixels on the internet, brought the backrooms to the big screen. What kind of place is the backrooms in the movie? It is a place of stagnation and temptation. It is a place so human it hurts. It is a realm where memory is sacred and always decaying. Fair warning, if you haven't seen the movie yet, this video will be chock full of spoilers. Also, the movie does contain on-screen depictions of cannibalism, which bothered me very much, as well as uncanny imagery. When I looked up why the movie was rated R, neither of those things was mentioned. First, let's talk about the style of the movie. The cinematography is gorgeous. It is perfection. It is everything I had hoped it would be. There are so many beautiful long shots where the characters are standing at one end of a huge room and the camera is placed at the far end of the room along the ceiling, and it makes the actors look so small and the environment so large. Almost every environment feels like a liminal space, even when there's multiple people in it. There's a scene where Clark goes to a pastel neighborhood. Despite the people hanging around, the space feels liminal and surreal because of the colors and arrangement of the houses, the absolute lack of clouds in the sky, and the placement of the horizon line below the middle of the camera frame. Clark owns a furniture store featuring an enormous space, a high ceiling, and an abundance of sales signs. Everything is discounted because nobody wants it. Nobody shops here. Clark's office is tiny and cluttered and claustrophobic, while Mary's is clean and open, with a light filtering through yellow curtains. Mary's office is designed to feel welcoming for her patients, and yet somehow feels cold. What might these environments tell us about the people who inhabit them? Well, the neighborhood that Clark visits is the place where his two college-aged employees live together. They are young, with promising lives ahead of them, and maybe even a family together in the future. It is a picture-perfect neighborhood, and their lives, while not perfect, are ordinary. Mary's office reflects how her professional life combats against her personal trauma. Her goal as a therapist is to help people break out of their destructive patterns so that they can live a full life. Through her flashbacks, it is revealed that Mary's mother suffered from some mental illness. Her mother was terrified of the outside world, as evidenced by the furniture piled in front of the door and the yellowed newspaper covering the windows. The yellow curtains in her office called to mind the yellow newspaper from her childhood. Her mother was stuck in a pattern, one that only broke through force. Her mother wasn't always like that, though. In another flashback, we see Mary and her mother make handprints in their driveway. Mary still keeps a concrete cast of her childhood handprint with her to remember those good days. As a therapist, Mary perceives that Clark struggles with loneliness, even though he refuses to admit it, and she tries to coax him out of his patterns. Even now, as an adult, though, Mary still has trouble with making positive relationships, which the viewer can see during the the scene where Mary goes to a house party. While someone is speaking to her, she visibly disassociates when she sees a woman and child playing together at a table. Her loneliness is reflected in the cold atmosphere of her office. And finally, Clark's faces reveal how he feels about himself. Like his furniture, Clark is discounted. When Clark and his employees are filming a commercial, Clark dresses up as a pirate, putting on the persona of a charismatic pirate to attract customers. While he hobbles on his fake peg leg, Clark quickly gets out of breath and struggles to speak. He lacks the energy and the conviction to maintain an attractive personality. Once they finish filming, Clark tells Bobby to open the store, but Kat says the store's been open. Even after putting on the song and dance, nobody came to his store. Perhaps because people can tell that his persona is a lie. The vastness of the store emphasizes the weight of his failures. By contrast, the smallness of his office, accentuated by the high camera angle, reflects how trapped he feels in his dead-end life. His wife kicked him out. He's homeless. He runs an unsuccessful store. And he's not fulfilling his dream of being an architect. It seems odd that he is an architect, and yet the only time we see him using his passion is to draw a floor plan, the Backrooms. He doesn't build anything. He doesn't design anything of his own. What does it mean that he is an architect who does not build? Perhaps, in some way, the Backrooms is a place that Clark built. Clark says that this is just the way he's wired. When he calls over an electrician to fix the lights in his store, the electrician talks about how oddly the breaker was designed. It wasn't wired correctly. It makes no sense, and the electrician can't fix it. Perhaps it is unfixable unless they gut the walls and forcibly rewire everything. The whole movie feels like a Kane Pixels YouTube video, just with a higher budget. The pacing, the symbolism, the surreal moments that seem to have nothing to do with the story until they connect in some key moment that makes the pieces all connect. All make the movie feel just like a longer version of Kane's YouTube videos. Specifically for the pacing, Kane's videos tend to be very slow, right until the climax, which is where everything speeds up and all of the tension that's been building this whole time catches up all at once. And then the falling action and ending is kinda like a long exhale after holding your breath. There are several significant moments that are filmed like analog horror, where one character is holding a 90s camcorder, filming everything. Two of my favorite cinematography moments come from the scenes where Clark and Mary first enter the Backrooms. When Clark is first exploring the Backrooms, several of the shots are perspective shots, meaning that the audience is watching Clark's perspective through the camera. It is delicious and a good homage to the found footage style without the diegetic camera. By contrast, Mary's foray into the Backrooms has no perspective shots. Instead, the camera will open on an empty room or an open doorway, and then a few seconds later, she will quietly pass into frame. It is almost as if someone else is watching Mary in the Backrooms, as if someone else's perspective is more important than hers. Stick a pin in that idea, because we will be coming back to that. Let's get into what the Backrooms itself represents in the movie. First off, the Backrooms is a place of stagnation, which is an odd claim to make, since the Backrooms is known as a place that constantly changes. Even in the movie itself, the environment is never exactly the same each time a character enters it. Not to mention the many layers of the Backrooms that reveal the same room, edited over and over again until it is wholly unrecognizable. We first meet Clark and Mary during a therapy session. After they roleplay Clark's last argument with his wife, Mary asks him how he feels. He says he feels angry, but he also says that he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He says that no matter what he does, he ends up hurting people. And he says, "That's just who I am." Clark has given up on the idea of changing. He thinks it is inevitable that he will hurt people, that hurting people is part of who he is. But Mary's response is odd. She says that his reaction is normal. And while I suppose it is normal, it doesn't seem like the most helpful thing she could have said. I'm not a therapist, so it's not like I would really know why she says that. The reason her response confuses me is because Clark takes it as an affirmation. If his reaction is normal, then there is no reason to change. And yet we see that Mary's goal as a therapist is the exact opposite. In one scene, we see Mary watching TV alone at night, eating from a dinner tray. A commercial is playing for one of her own self-help books. The Mary on the TV says that everyone has the power to break free from their self-destructive loops. How strange then that Mary is trying to help Clark develop positive relationships when she struggles to do so herself. The real problem, though, isn't that Mary struggles. No, therapists are not free from struggle. The real problem is that Clark does not want to change, and no amount of pushing can force Clark to act against his will. If he does not want to change, then he won't. Instead of changing, Clark falls in love with the Backrooms. He never wants to leave. Here, there is no one to disappoint. Here, he never has to change himself. Here, there are no more consequences for his actions, because every other person is an emotionless mannequin. His wife can never kick him out again. He can commit heinous acts against others and never feel guilty. No one here is real, and nothing he does is real either. And I'll admit it, I pitied Clark. To see such a wasteland of a life and prefer it over the abundance he could have had in the real world is crushing. He would rather stagnate in a false kitchen than even try to change his ways. Like stagnant water, the Backrooms is a place of stasis and rot. But it is also a place of temptation. It is beautiful, it is strange, it is mysterious. There are rooms upon rooms upon rooms, each stranger and more haunting than the last. No matter how much time you spend here, there is always something new to discover. And it looks so cursed. To prove to Mary that the Backrooms exists, he recruits his 2 college-aged employees, Bobby and Kat, to record footage and conduct research with him. The scene where Clark convinces these 2 to walk through the veil reminds me of the temptation in the Garden of Eden. Let me explain. In the book of Genesis, God tells Adam not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day he eats of it, he will surely die. When Satan enters the garden in the form of a snake, one of God's creatures, he comes to Adam and Eve to tempt them. It is telling that Satan only speaks to Eve, knowing that Adam will follow along if Eve does it first. Satan tells Eve that she will surely not die if she eats the forbidden fruit. Then Eve looks at the fruit, sees that it is desirable, eats it, and then offers it to Adam, who also eats it. Now, they don't die immediately. Instead, they become mortal. God curses them all for their disobedience. And then God places an angel with a flaming sword at the entrance to the garden so that no one can enter it again. And what happens in the movie? Clark shows them the doorway to the Backrooms, source of forbidden knowledge, and shows them that it's totally safe. Come on in. Bobby and Kat are terrified, but at Clark's coaxing, Bobby passes through. Bobby, amazed at the other side, tells Kat to come through. After worrying that it isn't safe and that this is all crazy, she finally enters. And you might be thinking that this is the end of the reference. But no, because Bobby and Kat die. Not immediately, oh no. Not until they regret what they've done and want to go home. But they don't get to go home because the entity within knows them. They never get to return to their pastel neighborhood. Clark told Mary that he would bring her proof that the Backrooms exist. But he told Bobby and Kat that they were going to do research. Within the Backrooms, Clark anchors a rope to a bed frame and ties the other end around Bobby's waist so he could film the area at the bottom of a steep ramp. And Kat asks a very important question. Why does Bobby have to do this? Can't you go down? And she's right. Any of them could hold the camera. Clark gives some half-hearted answer about Bobby already holding it, while Bobby says it's a rental. But we all know the truth. We all know that Clark would rather risk someone else's life instead of his own. When Bobby begs them to pull him back up, they do, but while Bobby fumbles with the knot around his waist, Clark grabs the camera to scan the footage. Since Clark is the one who tied the rope, he would have no trouble untying it, but he doesn't bother to help. Suddenly, the monster from below grabs the slack and yanks them all down, including the bed frame. The entity drags Bobby through a slit in the wall, and Kat and Clark run off in different directions. When they finally reunite, Clark is trapped in a dead end, but Kat can somehow see him through the wall on the other side. Kat cries, begging to go home. Perhaps the wall that Kat sees through is connected to the covered windows in Mary's childhood home. Perhaps her cries for help are the reason why Mary's mother feared the outside. Kat and Bobby die because of Clark's negligence, but the Backrooms remembers them. Even before they die, the Backrooms was already making a record of their existence. Bobby finds a copy of one of his shirts in the room where he dies. After their deaths, the Backrooms builds a replica of their pastel neighborhood, as well as a line of telephone poles displaying their missing posters. It is during the harrowing kitchen scene that Clark explains his theory to Mary, that the Backrooms remembers. It remembers people, places, moments, but it remembers them incorrectly. And each time it iterates on a memory, the more corrupted that memory becomes, until it bears no relation to the true event. This idea is most clearly shown in the faces of the remembered people. They have too many noses, too many mouths, and lopsided eyes. It's portrayed as a horrifying revelation, and yet is no different than what people do with their own memories. Remember the beginning of the movie when Mary and Clark are role-playing Clark's last fight with his wife? We, the audience, never see the true fight. We only see reenactments of it, first in Mary's office, then later in the Backrooms kitchen. Clark portrays his perspective in the fight, possibly with an extra veneer to make himself appear more righteous in Mary's eyes. Mary has no context for the fight, except for what Clark has told her through his own bias. We will never truly know how it happened. We can only see what they misremember. And just like the memories in the Backrooms, Clark and Mary's memory of the fight changes in each iteration. In Mary's office, Clark is passionate and manipulative, while Mary is quiet and steadfast. But in the false kitchen, Mary wrestles for control and puts him on the defensive. Remember when I mentioned that Clark gets the perspective camera while Mary walks through the Backrooms as though someone else is watching her? Here's where that comes back to us. Throughout this entire movie, Clark's perspective has taken center stage, while everyone else merely passes through. Clark's life is unfair. Clark's life is too lonely. Clark's life changes when he discovers the Backrooms. He's the main character, and everyone else is just along for the ride. And it is in the false kitchen's iteration that Clark's perspective finally gets challenged. Now we see the world through Mary's eyes, and it is terrifying to see Clark as he truly is. Clark dominates the scene with his carefully controlled face, the knife by his plate, and the stock-still memory of a woman in red huddling in the corner. I watched this movie with my dad, and unlike me, my dad knew from the first roleplay session that Clark was an abusive husband. My dad knew because Clark began with a lie. I'm sorry, I was working late. I also knew that was a lie, but instead of following the lie to its natural conclusion, I sat there confused. Why would he lie to Mary? Clark already told her that he had been out drinking. She knows the truth. So why would he start the roleplay with a lie? I didn't realize until this very moment, where we see Clark from Mary's perspective in the kitchen, what kind of husband Clark really was. Oh, but I love how Mary fights him through the conversation. She interrupts him. She cuts him down to the core. She forces him to face the truth. She tells him that he is a whiner. He blames everyone but himself for his problems, and then he refuses to reflect on his behavior and change. With tears in his eyes, Clark says, "I don't want to change." And Mary finally gives up on him. She says, "Then don't. Stay here. You don't have to change." She says it for her own survival, but this is also the moment where she relinquishes her role as therapist. If he refuses to change, there's nothing she can do but walk away. I feel as though I might have been a little too judgmental of Clark during this analysis. It is very easy to judge someone when you think you would never do the things that they do. And clearly, Clark did want to change at one point. After all, why else would he have gone to a therapist in the first place? Of course, he should have listened to Mary, because it is his refusal to change that kills him. As soon as he frees Mary from the chair, the ground shakes with the telltale thumps of the entity approaching. During this whole conversation, the remembered people stayed still, as though they weren't even there. he stabbed the man in the throat, even when he scalped the woman in red, none of them reacted. It's the reason why Clark believes that they can't feel pain. But the second they hear the entity's footsteps, the woman in red sprints for the corner, clawing at the wall for escape. Maybe she doesn't care what Clark does. Maybe it's because she and Clark are not in the same category of being. But whatever that entity is, terrifies her. Generally, I don't enjoy when the monster gets revealed because sometimes the monster isn't nearly as scary as what I was imagining. When the entity revealed himself to be an 8-foot-tall pirate Clark, I was disappointed because he looked silly. But even though I didn't think he looked scary enough, I still think this is the perfect reveal. Because this whole time, we thought the monster was supernatural, beyond human comprehension, when in reality, it was a man. So many of our monsters turn out to be ordinary people, men and women dressed in silly costumes, so normal and simple that no one would ever suspect the truth. Fun fact, Pirate Clark was played by a real human being. His name is Robert, and he is 7'7". That's 231.14 centimeters. That means they only had to CG a few parts of him, not his whole body. The movie implies that Pirate Clark is the same entity that killed Bobby and the researcher at the beginning. Unlike the other remembered people, Pirate Clark is active, violent, and the most reactive to stimuli. Despite the fact that Pirate Clark is a giant with a real peg leg, he seems like the most accurate memory. The pirate costume symbolizes how hard he tries to hide his nature, instead of facing it and humbling himself. His height reflects how terrifying and dangerous he is to the people around him, while his large eyes and sagging face emphasize just how sad his life truly is. It is ironic that Clark claims that the remembered people can't feel pain, and yet when Pirate Clark enters the kitchen, he approaches his memory with so much tenderness. If only he had extended such kindness to others. Pirate Clark, of course, kills him because he doesn't recognize Clark as himself. There is also the implication that Clark inadvertently taught his memory that people are food. Monkey see, monkey do. But Mary is different. She fights against her past to build a healthy future. Her final confrontation with Pirate Clark symbolizes this. After chasing her into the remembered furniture store, he pins her against the floor, intending to eat her. But she pulls out the concrete cast of her handprint and bashes it against his head until the cast breaks, and he lets her go. I wonder what the implications are for destroying a memory in a place where everything is memory. The ending of the movie has confused a lot of people. Here is what I see. I see a repeating cycle, a conversation in a cold room, an interview between Mary and a man who used to be normal, a passionate man, enamored with a forbidden world, refusing to let Mary leave the room. You can see in Mary's face the moment she recognizes the pattern. Like Clark and Bobby, the researcher hungers for more knowledge. Like that, Mary wants to leave as soon as possible, but the men won't let her. The movie ends showing each iteration of the Backrooms memories. Mary's childhood home, Kat and Bobby's missing posters, and at last, the memory of Mary sitting in the interrogation room, her unfocused eyes staring at the half-buried floor. Like a human, the Backrooms remembers and misremembers. Like a human, the Backrooms gets caught in ever-deteriorating cycles until nothing remains but the memory of yellow walls, loneliness, and anxious eyes. Somewhere in the backrooms is the memory of a Christmas party with a happy family. Somewhere there is the memory of intrepid researchers venturing further into the unknown. Perhaps even there is the memory of me writing and recording the script, and the memory of you watching this video. And with each iteration it fades and fades until there's nothing left but the blue light from the computer screen and the echo of keyboard clicks. I hope that they're happy there. I hope the cycle is kind to them. I think it has to be.